Oh, howdy y'all, grab yourselves a beer. It is time for some Path of Exile discussion. ExileCon is just around the corner, and I thought I'd go through the schedule, give a bit of a sense of what's really looking exciting, and also some of the things that, because there's multiple events on at any given time, some of the things I'll have to end up missing, and then, there'll be various coverage from different people that head there as to what goes on in those sessions. So the pathofexile.com/ExileCon site has been updated. And whilst there's the VIP stuff on the first night, I actually couldn't afford a VIP ticket at the time that the tickets went on sale, so I've got a normal ticket. And just having a quick look through, that means that my first day is the Saturday, although I'll be in New Zealand from the Thursday morning. So there is a chance to, there's a pre-show that's being run by Kriparian, Ziggy D, and Taki. So these are three very well-known streamers, all of whom are active on YouTube as well. They're all worth following. So Kriparian and Ziggy D are more generalist gaming streamers now, although both have had an extensive relationship with Path of Exile in the past. And I think Toucan is someone who does Path of Exile for about 6 to 8 weeks at the start of each league, then sort of goes and plays other games when the leagues get a bit quieter. So they're running a pre-show whilst people are being seated in the main theatre. Then there's the announcement keynote. Now, this has got Chris Wilson running it as well as Jonathan Rogers, so it's going to be a big announcement event. This is likely where we're going to get the first taste of information about 4.0. Also, there'll be some information presumably about 3.9 as well. So this is going to be the equivalent of what would normally be the sort of trailer that's dumped on YouTube a couple of hours, or no, actually it may even be at this time, a couple of weeks before each of the expansions comes out. This will be really exciting, and it's the highlight. So it's at 10 a.m. New Zealand Daylight Saving Time, which is about the same time of day as league start is in your time zone. And if you're only going to watch one thing, I highly, highly, highly recommend that this is the thing that you stream and watch from home. After that, this is where we start having the split ups. So we've got Creating Game Effects in Path of Exile, which I assume is going to be a graphics animation type setting, which will be really interesting for people with any sort of background in three-dimensional art, things like that. Not my area of expertise, so I may go out of interest, but it's not something that's on my absolutely I must check this out list. There's going to be Kriparian, Ziggy D, and Taki discussing the keynote. That's probably going to be really interesting. And then they're doing an interview with Jonathan Rogers as well. There's also an opportunity to get autographs from Quinn. There's a whole, it looks like they're doing signing stage. I'm assuming that that's what that is. And so that'll be some sort of interesting side things. I'm kind of tempted to go to the interview with Jonathan Rogers here, but I may end up changing my mind and going to Creating Game Effects instead. 12 noon, there are two different 4.0 themes. So you can either watch Kriparian play 4.0 and give his first impressions to Jonathan. That could be really interesting. Kriparian's someone who's been out of Path of Exile for a while, but has a really good base level of knowledge of core game concepts. So he'll be a really entertaining person to follow there. Alternately, there's a session on 4.0.0 world building. I'm kind of tempted to go to that. And the world building is going to be really interesting because, one, I think there'll be a lot of information that will come out of this. I'm kind of expecting, if you talk to Innocence in the epilogue, so after you kill Katava, you go and talk to Innocence, and he'll give you a whole thing about a mission that he's going to take to the extreme south of the world. I wouldn't be surprised if that is something that's built on in 4.0.0. But, of course, there's lots of other possibilities as well. Next up, we have the 3.9.0 expansion and league deep dive. Now, this is the second thing that I would suggest that you stream from home if you can't make it to ExileCon itself. This will be a whole lot of information about the upcoming league, the league that will be replacing Blight League. And then the same thing, but for 4.0.0 game mechanics deep dive. So I think there's going to be a sizable overhaul of a number of core foundational concepts in Path of Exile. Two that I think are really due for an overhaul are flasks. I think it's time to bite the bullet and make it so that flasks are no longer auras with an awkward method of keeping them up, but making them into a strategic choice as to when to use them. And that would mean biting the bullet and making it so that flasks cannot be recharged while they're currently being used. That would be totally transformative of the game, and so I think 4.0 is the place for that to happen, because it's a massive, massive change in character power. Likewise, I think that the resistance system is something that is just really stale. It's something that we inherited from Diablo 1 and 2, and that I think that there are far better systems that could be used instead, so that resistances cease being a case of you must get your 75 or your 135% from some sources, and then beyond that they don't do anything at all. So yeah, I think there'll be a whole lot of systems, fundamental systems like that, could be getting overhauled in 4.0.0. I'm only speculating that it'll be resistances and flasks, but time will tell, I guess, there. There's also the potential for changes to the core mechanics, things like armor, evasion, energy shield, that could be done, although I think all three of those are in a slightly better place at the moment. Next up, we have the popular podcast Bakelast will be run live with Tarkat, RazeQT, Octavian, and Nguyen. And then at the same time, there's storytelling in Path of Exile. The story of Path of Exile is interesting in that there's your core story of each of the 10 acts, which is sort of quite in your face. And also the, I guess you could call it Act 11, the story of Zana and the, Zana's quest, the Elder, the Shaper, and their battle and the like. But then there's a whole lot of really hidden stories. For instance, it's really fascinating when you do the Vaal side areas, that at the end of each one of them, and this doesn't matter whether they're ones that you find during the leveling experience or they're ones that you spawn yourself by putting a fragment into the map device, you'll find there'll be little information there about snippets of life within the decaying Vaal Empire. So you'll see basically a last statement from the people that have been sacrificed in those areas. Those are really interesting in terms of world building. I think one of the things that Path of Exile does really well is having this sort of hidden world building. Additionally, this is not being streamed live, although that should mean that it's being recorded. I think this would be a really interesting session. It's not one that's an absolute must go to, but I think it's something that'd be really, really interesting. Now, game designers, answer your hardcore questions. Awkward thing about the naming of this, I'm not sure whether they mean hardcore as in the game setting hardcore, or hardcore as in your super in-depth, totally unapproachable for people outside of the core player base of Path of Exile. So I'm actually not sure whether this is about the hardcore game mode or just your sort of super in-depth queries, and I guess we'll find that out. This could be quite interesting though. The alternative is to see Ziggy and Amy, who will be doing a gameplay demo, and then Amy will be interviewing Eric about Path of Exile's art. Again, the artwork in Path of Exile is stunning, as anyone that has the Crucible core pack will be able to attest to. The physical artwork that was provided in that is absolutely amazing. Or alternately, you can go and pester Chris Wilson to get his autograph or whatever at this point. So that's the end of the core Saturday events, and then it's Sunday. Sunday will be procedural world generation in Path of Exile. Oh my god, this is going to be a fascinating thing in my opinion. This is, I'm assuming, is going to go into the nitty-gritty of the algorithms that are used to design the various map layouts that exist and things like that. This is just going to be one of those sessions that is going to have a huge interest to me personally. So with GGG Reese running it, I think this will be a fantastic session. But of course, not everyone's cup of tea. Alternately, you can pick up an autograph from various people, or you can watch Quinn interview Chris, and Zizaran interviewing Neon about boss design will be really interesting as well. I think that Path of Exile's boss design has been something that it's a really polarizing topic in the community, because some people love the bosses that are the same every time, that have slightly more complex mechanics like Uber Elder, but every time you run the encounter it's the same. Other people like the ones that have more variety. So for instance, the Minotaur or the Cortex both of these are mechanically simpler fights than than Uber Elder, but both of them have the incredible complexity that's added by map mods that are different every time you run them. And of course, one of the consequences of having these sorts of map mods is that, and particularly this is the case for all on the Cortex, that sometimes these mods can render a very rare boss encounter pretty close to impossible to beat. So I'd be keen to see some of the discussion that comes out of there about the impact of map mods. It's my personal opinion that bosses should have different map mods. So where, for instance, you need to add 100% of damage as added fire for it to be impactful on trash monsters, on bosses actually adding even 15 or 20% damage as fire will be transformative to the encounter, will make the encounter considerably harder. And likewise for things like AoE. AoE, 100% increased AoE on an entire map is not something that's particularly impactful. But you give that to the Minotaur, or much worse, you give it to all, and suddenly it's an absolute game changer. And I'd be really interested to see, actually, what the Shaper fight would feel like if it was able to have increased AoE and things like that made the fight different every time you ran it. Anyways, that's a total side note there. We have a Q&A with the GGG founders. This would be really interesting, I think. It's the sort of thing that will have probably both on-topic and off-topic questions. Chris Wilson obviously is very well known as a fan of Magic the Gathering, so there'll probably be questions related to MTG in there. At the same time, there'll also be lots of on-topic questions as well. And I'd expect there'll probably be some questions from people that want to replicate the success that GGG have had. People that have got a bit of experience in game design, game coding and the like, and that want to know some of the business side of the industry as well. One of the things that GGG have done really well is keeping to a quite ethical microtransaction approach where there's no pay-to-cheat aspects, and the only really ethically dubious things in the store are the mystery boxes. So that'll be something that'd be really interesting to see. This comes, of course, at the same time as an interview of animators, which again be something absolutely fascinating if you have a background in art and a builds panel. With Engineering Eternity being on this, I'm sure it will be fascinating. After this, we have Evolving Path of Exile's renderer. Now, this I think is in there because I'm assuming there'll be major changes to the graphics in 4.0.0. And so that's why they'll have this after the 4.0.0 major announcement. Taki is interviewing developers about content creation. This would be really interesting, and I think it's something I'll go to because Taki is much more experienced in the industry of content creation than I am. I do it for a hobby, he does it for a job. So it'd be really interesting to see both his questions and also some of the sort of synergy that exists between GGG. Because, to be honest, the primary marketing for this game seems to be building up its Twitch following, which makes a lot of sense because, the most enthusiastic people that play a game are the best advertisement for it. Next up, we have Mathil playing 4.0, unfortunately, during what I assume is going to be the lunch break for the convention. And Octavian interviewing devs about balance. This is something I'm definitely going to have to go to because I always have a lot of opinions on balance, and it's something that I think is one of my personal. It's one of those things where I have an opinion. I have opinions that are generally fairly divergent from a lot of other players. So I'd be interested to see how that goes. After lunch, we have Riker interviewing the founders of Blizzard North, which would be really interesting because. Obviously, Diablo 1 and 2 were absolutely central to Path of Exile, to the entire... In a lot of ways, Path of Exile is the sequel to Diablo 2. Diablo 3 is a different game that has the same lore and the same world. But in terms of a spiritual successor, Path of Exile is a spiritual successor to Diablo 2 with all of its customization and the ability for you to make serious mistakes that wreck your character and things like that. So the build flexibility and the like that existed in D2, Path of Exile has taken on over that. So it'd be really interesting to see how the founders of Blizzard North feel about this being a spiritual successor to their game. And they're not involved, as far as I'm aware, in the Diablo franchise anymore. Alternately, though, there's Zizaran playing 4.0.0 and talking to Chris. Zizaran being, of the people that create content for Path of Exile regularly and that are known as content creators, Zizaran is probably one of the two, Zizaran and Mathil, with the most technical skill in playing the game. And where Mathil tends to play builds that are more optimized for fun, Zizaran optimizes for power. So in a lot of ways, Zizaran is the power gamer, is the most power gamer-esque of the various content creators for Path of Exile. So this will be really interesting to see how much he can break stuff in the new setup. And then there's Quinn playing 4.0.0 and Riker playing 4.0.0 and talking to Jonathan. Riker, of course, being a general games news coverer. So he'll be someone who's really interesting to watch. And then we've got the big thing that I think a lot of people are interested in, the $17,500 prize pool race to kill Act 5 Katava, which 4 people have qualified for. It's just going to be 4 people. It's getting commentated by Ziggy D and Raze QT. It's being played with modified softcore rules, where a death causes your character to suffer 60 seconds of paralysis, and then you're able to raise and play on with normal softcore rules. So this will be an absolutely fascinating thing. Anyways, that's the schedule of what's happening over the time of ExileCon, and then of course there's an after party, and I'm really hyped for it all. I'm going to be leaving Australia on Wednesday night and arriving at fuck this shit AM on Thursday, and basically about sunrise Auckland time. I'll be tired, and then Thursday I'm going to get myself settled in. I want to try and organize a day hike either Thursday or Friday, and also organise some sort of karaoke night if I can find a venue in Auckland, which I'm assuming I can do, for the Thursday night. So if you're keen to come along to that, definitely message in the comments below. Then I'm returning to Australia. I'm not staying all that long. I'm returning to Australia on the Tuesday after the convention. If anyone's keen to catch up while you're over there, then definitely message me either on Reddit or in the YouTube comments. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that. It's going to be interesting to get over there and see what is lined up for 4.0.0 as well as 3.9.0. And 3.9.0 is probably pretty close to finish, so I'm really interested to see what the theme that they've gone for is in that. And also, I'm particularly interested to see the things that are going immediately into the core game, because the last time we got a big change to the core game with an expansion was 3.1.0 when Uber Elder was added. Oh, sorry, no, Uber Elder wasn't added immediately. He was delayed 3 months, but when the entire Elder quest line was added, Shaper and Elder items was transformative to the game, so hopefully this will be as good as that was. Anyways, going to leave it there. Any questions, fire away below.